Monsters typically has a very bad matchup against Mono Blue. Master of Waves is obviously a problem. Green and red doesn't have access to actually really get that card off of the board in a great way. Yes, you can overload Museum Mortars, kills the problem cards, which are the elemental tokens, but not Master itself. But, you know, just having an efficient way to be able to deal with that is certainly a benefit. Also, Thassa really does just reign supreme in this matchup. And not having a great way to take care of that game 1, yes, you do have options in game 2 and game 3, assuming that Chris is playing Unravel the Aether, excuse me. We'll see how he's able to answer this. As you do see, we're going to start off here with a Temple of Deceit. Judge's Familiar is the top card of the deck here, so maybe Gregg's got a little black splash in the old Mono Blue Devotion deck, as he's going to pass the turn back over to VanMeter. You see his hand, he's got a Stomping Ground, he's got a basic Forest over there, a Temple of Abandon, Domri Rod, a Mizium Mortars over here. Look at his hand, there's 2 Domries, a Mizium Mortars, and a bunch of lands. So not the best start, but a Scryland can probably change that.
Yeah, a little slow of an opening here. With the Scrylands and Mono Blue Devotion, we have seen occasionally them touch a little bit of them, similar to the way that the Mono Black does, although that's less typical in Mono Blue Devotion because the deck's a little bit faster and more efficient. We've also seen Mono Blue lists that have actually splashed a couple black cards off of the Temples and Watery Graves.
Cloudfin Raptor, going to start things off here for Gregg, going to get him onto the board. Looks like he's got a Judge's Familiar to follow up with here. So now an Evolution on the Raptor is going to make that into a 1-2. So he's got a little bit of a board now, can start pressuring, but most importantly, building up that Devotion count for his 2 best cards in Thassa and Master of Waves.
And, you know, like we mentioned before, the Red Green Monsters deck list is... The Red Green Monster list is just a little susceptible to flyers, so this is a very good start for Gregg.
All right, so here is a Stomping Ground, and we're going to follow that up with an Elvish Mystic. So now VanMeter ramping a little bit here, but again, we see his hand. He's got the Domries. The one thing that he will be ramping into now is Mizium Mortars with Overload in this particular matchup. Of course, it's going to have to likely be for 7 mana as opposed to 6 because that Judge's Familiar is out there. But he needs to really find some giant monster to put in play, which is, of course, the namesake of the deck. But Pelucranos, Stormbreath Dragon, Gorkline Rampager, just something so that Gregg isn't basically goldfishing here.
Yeah, the edge that the Mono Blue Devotion list has in this matchup is just pure efficiency. The Red Green Monsters deck's a little bit slower out of the gate. And so anything that the Monsters deck can do to catch that up is really important. And the Mana Accelerants being the most common way that that happens.
Nightveil Spectre going to come down here for Gregg pre-combat to evolve that Cloudfin Raptor and attack here for 3 in the air. It's going to put VanMeter down to 17. Now Gregg this is one of the best starts that he can have, you know, ignoring maybe a Tidebinder Mage or a Frostburn Weird in this particular matchup. He's got 5 Devotion on the table right now. If Master of Waves or Thassa does come to play, they're going to have a huge impact on this game. And you can see in Gregg's hand right now, he does have a Biden to Thassa in his hand. Not sure if he has the 4th land, but if he does have a 4th land and Biden comes in, going to add to Devotion, but also going to be able to draw 3 cards.
Yeah, the Mono Blue Devotion list has all sorts of 4-mana haymakers once it gets ahead on the board. Biden, of course, Master of Waves, and even Jace, Architect of Thought, can bury someone once you're ahead on the board.
Yep. So Chris is going to start his turn by playing a Forest, and he does have access to 4 mana on this turn. Looks like he might fire off that Mizium Mortars. I'm sure this isn't a spot that he wants to use it in. I think in this particular matchup, overloading it is probably the goal, and you do have Mana Acceleration and Sylvan Caryatid and Elvish Mystic to be able to do that. There's a Scavenging Ooze as well. So using all of his mana this turn, and, you know, slowing down Gregg a little bit, slowing down the Devotion, not underneath so much pressure in the air. But again, if Gregg is able to find a land for the Biden of Thassa, things change drastically.
Yeah, this is a pretty big turn for VanMeter in terms of just breaking serve a little bit in the game. It's the first turn that he's really been able to advance his own board and make inroads into what Gregg's doing. But you can see the kind of discrepancy in efficiency between these 2 decks right now.
Mutavault comes rolling off the top here for Gregg, so he does have a 4th land. You do see the foil Biden of Thassa in his hand, the promo edition. But the other card that he has in his hand right now is a Jace. But the one I want to highlight right now is Pithing Needle, because Pithing Needle in this matchup is a little bit interesting. It's not a main deck card you often see from Mono Blue Devotion, but given the exact situation that we're in, naming Scavenging Ooze might actually be pretty good here.
Oh, Pithing Needle has a lot of targets against VanMeter's deck. Scavenging Ooze, of course, the most obvious one. He also has some Planeswalkers in his list, too. So, like you said, Pithing Needle, not a common main deck inclusion, but there's going to be no shortage of good targets for Gregg to name here.
Now, the big question here for Gregg is, does he deploy that Biden or does he deploy Jace? And if he does deploy Jace, what's he want to do with it? If you're in this situation, what do you want to do?
Probably play Biden, because Jace has a pretty set amount of value. You get to plus it and minus it a few times. It's really hard for that card to fluctuate very much. Biden fluctuates a ton, and when you have an opening to get it in play for good value, you normally have to take it.
Well, that's exactly what Gregg is going to do. So he's going to put down the Biden. He's going to attack for 3 in the air, but more importantly, he's not going to add 1, but 2 cards to his hand. Island and a Domestication to the grip. Domestication, a card that we have seen in these decks as a one-of, mostly in the sideboard, but don't forget at the Invitational in Las Vegas, we saw Gregg Hatch, the runner-up, play a whole lot of those in his main deck.
Yeah, there's a lot of matches where Domestication is this deck's best card. So its presence fluctuates. It almost certainly appears in the 75 somewhere in some number. In the main deck, you often see 0 or 1 are the most common numbers, but Gregg's picked up his, and it has a chance to be very good this game.
So VanMeter draws a card. You see his hand. He moves a forest to the front. He still has those 2 copies of Domri in his hand. He needs to start getting these creatures off the board before Biden really snowballs and makes this game too difficult to win. Thankfully for VanMeter, there's a creature in the graveyard that he can remove with the Scavenging Ooze, make it into a 3/3, play a Domri, fight that Cloudfin Raptor, and maybe start to turn things around a little bit here.
Yeah, the issue is going to be that that needle in Gregg's hand is going to be very good against this sequence as well.
Yeah, and the interesting here too is, okay, if let's say that sequence takes place, Chris removes the Nightveil Spectre. It looks like the avenue he's going to go down, make a Scavenging Ooze into a 3/3, gain a life, go up to 15. Domri, maybe fight the Raptor, kill that, maybe remove the Raptor with the Elvish Mystic, get in for 4. Okay, if the plan here for Gregg is to play a Needle, what are you naming?
Well, I mean, Domri he can just finish off if Gregg fights here. So you're probably needling the Ooze, assuming that Chris does not push it out of Domestication range.
Okay. Now, of course, we're working with solid information. We know there's another Domri hanging out in Chris's hand, so maybe we want to name that just because we know that it's there. But again, that's difficult for Gregg to actually know, and we'll see what ends up happening here. But we do see the sequence of remove your Nightveil Spectre, make my Ooze into a 3/3, play Domri, -2 it, fight your Cloudfin Raptor, get that off the board. Not only is Chris slowing down Gregg's momentum a little bit, he's keeping his life total high. He's going to 16 now, and he's lowering the devotion count.
Yeah, he's making some inroads in the board here. Again, that Biden puts Chris under so much pressure to answer everything that he's not out of the woods yet, but he's had a couple reasonable turns here catching up.
Ooze being a 4/4 now, going to stay out of Domestication range, so that's important. And I think it would have been very easy for VanMeter to just attack with the Elf and attack with the Scavenging Ooze. But, obviously Chris is a veteran, has a lot of experience with this deck, knows that he's playing against Mono Blue Devotion, so knows that, hey, there could be a Domestication looming in the main deck.
Yes.
So I had better make this a 4/4 because if my Ooze gets taken, I don't really have anything else. I'm kind of relying on this Ooze right now to get the job done, as Dieckhaus is going to draw a card. He's got 5 in the grip right now. You see, again, the Domestication. He's got the Jace, he's got the Needle, and 2 lands. Of those lands, there's a Mutavault hanging out there.
Yeah, I think there's actually still an argument in Gregg's spot here to just needle the Domri and draw a card with the Judge's Familiar through the Biden, because that way he doesn't have to worry about future Domris, and there's no creatures in the graveyard at this point, so Scavenging Ooze has lost a lot of its punch. So a turn that I could imagine here, for example, is Needle on Domri, well, attack you with Judge's Familiar and draw a card, Needle on Domri, domesticate your Elf. Pin him on mana a little bit, get another threat, which is valuable because you have Biden, and take away some of Chris's mana. Even though Chris has 5 mana in play, you're saying, what's the Elf worth? Well, the Red Green Monster list has a lot of 4 and 5 mana cards. It has Monstrous on things like Pelukrinos and Stormbreath Dragon, so and of course, the threat of Mizium Mortars being overloaded is there as well, so all the mana matters.
Yeah, those mana accelerants are really the key that makes this deck work. Being able to play multiple spells in one turn, and we were playing multiple spells in one turn of the power level of this deck, you want to be able to stop them from doing that. It's interesting to see Scavenging Ooze play a pretty important role in this particular game. I don't think it's thought of as a card that plays a huge role in this particular matchup. You think of Pelukrinos, you think of Mortars, you maybe think of Domri as, the cards that you want to draw in this matchup, and also the mana acceleration, be able to get them out ahead of schedule. But Ooze is actually playing a big role in this game, given the context.
Right.
Dieckhaus really deciding what he wants to do in this turn, and this is the, you could argue, the crucial turn in the game of, okay, do I fire up Mutavault and draw 2 cards? Do I play Needle? If I play Needle, what do I name? Do I play Jace and up it, because that's not the worst play in the world, or do I just play Jace and down it knowing that it can die, but I need some cards?
To me, the decision all hubs on what Gregg wants to do with the Pithing Needle that's in his hands.
Okay.
Like I said, I think my instinct would just be to draw a card with the Judge's Familiar, Needle the Domri, and then playing Jace here is fine. I might have domesticated the Elf, but it's close there. The other line that he has is just using the Judge's Familiar to finish off Domri, and then needling, Scavenging Ooze, or simply holding the Needle in his hand for something else.
All right, well, we're going to go with Jace. That's where Gregg's going to start first, and now it looks like he's going to play his Needle as well. And then, of course, once we have confirmation of what that Needle is naming, we'll let you guys know at home, as Needle is going to come down here. And I'm very interested to see how he's going to use that Jace, because, of course, it does start at 5 loyalty. He has not used it. He has not moved it up or down yet. Now he is going to name Domri, as you see him point to the Planeswalker. Or now he points to the Scavenging Ooze. So we will get confirmation on exactly what that is naming. And then we're going to see what Gregg's going to do as far as attacking is concerned and what he wants to do with his Planeswalker.
Like I said, that Pithy Needle play is pretty close there. I mean, it's definitely complicated, but I think the fact that there's no creatures in the graveyard and it shuts down the future Domris would lead me to, and you have the upside of drawing a card this turn as well. And he has named Domri, so Gregg is going with the play that I like here.
And in case you're wondering, Pithy Needle, again, not a card that we see main deck. It will oftentimes, as you mentioned right at the top, we'll see mono blue decks have maybe one Domestication, one Cyclonic Rift, Rapid Hybridization. Those are your typical one-ofs. There are not one. There are 2 copies of Pithy Needle in Dieckhaus' main deck. And we'll see how that ends up working out for him over the course of this tournament, but in particular in this match.
Yes.
So, Judge's Familiar comes across, draws Gregg a card. He drew him a Tidebinder Mage. VanMeter quickly going to untap, and it looks like it's time for him to get to work. He's going to start off with a Temple of Van. He sees an Elvish Mystic. I think that's an easy one to put towards the bottom. He's looking for a big dummy, and he hasn't found one yet.
His hand appears to be 2 lands and another Domri, which is shut off for the remainder of the game due to that Pithy Needle. Although Chris does have a main deck copy of Destructive Revelry, so he does have one out here.
Now that is surprising. You don't see that card in main deck. And, a lot of the time, we've been seeing people move towards Unravel the Aether instead of Destructive Revelry. Now, of course, both of them will get the job done, but very surprising to see that enchantment and artifact removal in the main deck this particular weekend.
Yeah, it's an interesting metagame call here, but it would certainly be very good right now against a board involving Biden and Pithy Needle.
Jace going to move on up. It looks like we see an attack here to the Ooze 2, Jace, so it's going to go down to 2 counters. But at the end of the day, Chris's turn, not very impressive. Again, you mentioned 2 lands, Domri in the hand, and he just has to pass the turn back with Elvish Mystic kind of on defense, but it's not really defending anything. It just couldn't attack because of Jace moving up, giving it -1/-0 when it does attack. So now Dieckhaus is kind of the one in the driver's seat here, and it looks like he's going to start his turn off with a Tidebinder Mage.
Yeah, absolutely. And when Biden of Thassa comes into play, you have 2 ways you can try to win the game against it. You can kill everything your opponent plays, or you could win the game really quickly and not give them time to deploy the extra cards. Chris is in a position to do neither of those things, and so this Biden is likely to run away with the game.
Now, we talked about how this is a difficult matchup here for VanMeter, and I think Tidebinder Mage is reason number 1 of many. Of course, Mono Blue Devotion has to main deck this card. They don't really have much of a choice because they need the Devotion, but it also happens to be good against the green decks in the format, and this is definitely one of them.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of systemic problems that Red Green has in the matchup. It's efficiency. It's a little soft to flyers. There's some other stuff going on here. The fact that there's 4 Tidebinder Mages in the deck as well is just a real kick in the teeth.
Gregg going to attack there with the Judge's Familiar. He'll draw a card. It's an island. He'll happily pass the turn back. Don't think he used his Jace on this turn. I think he may have forgotten.
There's a lot of little nickel and dime stuff going on Craig's board, so not a shock to see something get lost in the shuffle.
Here's a Sylvan Caryatid. I think you see Chris kind of motioning his hand saying, well, you passed the turn and you forgot to activate the Jace. Nothing personal, but, we're playing a tournament here.
Yeah.
You get the opportunity to do it next turn, and I drew a Sylvan Caryatid, so you're doing just fine, trust me.
Yeah, don't worry about it, man.
Yeah. My Ooze is dead, my Domris are dead, you're okay, I promise.
Yeah, even if Chris finds something like Mizium Mortars here, he's still in a lot of trouble.
Yep. So, Gregg is going to draw his card. It's a Judge's Familiar that he draws for the turn. He's going to deploy an island here. Chris helps him out a little bit, untaps that Judge's Familiar for him. Chris knowing, chances are I'm not going to be able to win this particular game. Jace is going to tick up to 3. Now, you may be wondering, you see that Temple of Deceit in play there for Dieckhaus, wondering, is he splashing black? Sometimes I see, those temples in the deck. Is there anything he has access to? No, just scry. Yep, that's it.
Again, it's not the first time that we've seen this in Blue Devotion lists. It's definitely rarer than in Mono Black, as the blue deck is trying to go 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop. There's less room to find room for a come into play tap land in that sequence. But like I said, this is not the first time.
And, part of the reason you might be playing that is because Nightveil Spectre, you find a card off that. You can cast a black card in the Mono Black Devotion matchup because he has 4 copies of Temple Deceit in his deck. So not facilitating any black cards, but makes Nightveil Spectre just a little bit better if it does hit a nice card in the Mono Black matchup. And you have to assume, coming into a tournament like this, with there are over 700 players, you're going to play against Mono Black Devotion a couple times. Familiar is going to come across, deal a little bit of damage here, draw Gregg another card. Tidebinder Mage, of course, not attacking because Sylvan Keratin and its 3 toughness. VanMeter going to play a Forest. Looks like he's finally drawn something of consequence, and it's one of the better cards in the matchup. Pulkranos World Eater is going to show up.
Yeah, this is a good start for Chris to, again, start to make some inroads to the board. He can kill the Tidebinder Mage next turn. He can start plucking away at those Judges Familiars, but Gregg's doing a lot of damage right now with those Judges Familiars and all the cards he's drawing. He may find an answer to the Pulkranos this turn, or it simply might not be enough. Gregg has so many extra cards at this point that...
It's a little late to the party. You see, Domestication is going to take care of Pulkranos temporarily.
Yeah.
And part of the reason you might see this, because Domestication is going to leave at the end of turn, part of the reason you might see this is so he can get in maybe some damage. I guess not the best use of Domestication in this particular board state, because again, Tidebinder Mage still isn't going to be able to attack past the Keratin. So
it does allow him to animate Mutavault and attack with that as well, along with the Tidebinder Mage.
This is true.
It does free up that attack potentially.
We'll see if Gregg is going to take the opportunity to make that attack and see what else he's playing this turn. But I think for Chris, he needed to draw something of consequence on that turn, and he found it. And Pulkranos is arguably the best card in this matchup for him, and it's one card that can turn around the game immediately.
Yep.
So now the Familiars are going to come across in the air. That does not have haste, so that is not going to attack. You see Chris pointing that out, saying, Pulkranos is not attacking me just yet, or ever.
Were Pulkranos in play for a couple turns, this still would not work, as Domestication causes the controller to switch and therefore Pulkranos to gain Summoning Sickness, but it came into play this turn anyway, so.
Yeah. So it looks like we're just going to see some birdies in the sky. VanMeter's going to go down to 11, but more importantly, Dieckhaus, assuming he does remember his triggers on Bident, is going to draw 2 cards. We'll see if he does remember that.
He also has his Jason play.
So now he does use Jace, and that means that he missed the opportunity to draw cards off the Bident.
No, I think he's just resolving this all at the same time here.
Okay.
Or he pointed at the Bident, so.
Yeah, you see, now you see, because he activated Jace after his attack step. And you see Chris pointing that out, saying Bident is in the combat step when you deal damage. And we'll bring Bident up for you guys so you can obviously see exactly how this card does work. We're not even talking about the function of, the fact that, it can make creatures attack and all that good stuff. But it says you may draw a card.
Yeah.
So it's your option to draw or not.
You can point at the Bident, say trigger, and then still fail to draw.
Correct.
Which makes it different than a lot of other triggers where simply pointing and acknowledging it sort of means that you have to now go through all of the steps.
That's correct.
Bident can be forgotten even when it's remembered, which makes it a little bit different than a lot of other cards you see with triggers.
And, you can tell over the course of this game because, Gregg may be a little bit nervous being in his first feature match here or anything like that, but Chris is doing everything appropriate here. He's helping, Gregg, untap his things and sequencing and things of that nature. And you see him explaining now where, this with Bident, it happens in combat. You use Jace, so that means you've passed priority in combat to go to your second main phase and take that up. So Chris is certainly not in the wrong here.
Yeah, it's sometimes, challenging for someone who's making these operations mistakes or who is maybe not familiar with all the nuances of the rules to explain sort of the TCG legalese. It's, if we were playing at the kitchen table, yeah, of course you'd, just do your stuff. But in a tournament setting, it's important for you to order things correctly under the rules, and Chris going through and explaining that to Gregg at the moment.
Now here's a Cloudfin Raptor post-combat after Jace did tick up. You see, Dieckhaus does have that Tidebinder Mage still in his hand. Now Domestication's going to trigger. That's going to go away. Pulkranos is going to go back over to VanMeter.
And now VanMeter gets an opportunity for a big swing here to Monstrous this Pulkranos for a lot.
So you see how much mana, we'll see Chris draw a card. He draws a copy of Xenagos, the Planeswalker form.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So Xenagos is net positive mana this turn?
So 4 mana spell, and then it adds 3 mana. So I don't think net positive, right? 4 mana for Xenagos, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So he could play Xenagos and the Monstrosity for 3. I think more importantly, he probably just wants to get Xenagos onto the table because it does something.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what he was going to do. So he's going to play Xenagos the Reveler.
The important thing, is any Planeswalker that Chris can put into play that's threatening causes Gregg to have to devote some of his attackers to that instead of potentially Chris and then drawing cards off of Biden.
Yes. Now the big question here, of course, is how exactly...
Okay, so it's net -1. So
Yeah.
Xenagos is an admin of this turn.
The big question here is how exactly does he want to use the Pulokranos? Because, that card is the card that he is relying on to get the job done.
Yeah.
He doesn't have anything else. His Domri obviously is needled. His other Domri in his hand doesn't matter. His Scavenging Ooze can't attack as a Tidebinder Mage. Chris doesn't know about the Tidebinder Mage that's hanging out, but it looks like he's going to activate right now 4/3. Monstrosity is going to be 4/3. So now he gets to deal 3 damage however he wants. Now, of course, those creatures will fight Pulokranos and they will lose. But we'll see exactly where the damage is going to go. So he's going to go 1/1/1. 1 to Raptor, 1 to the Judge's Familiar, 1 to the other Judge's Familiar. Make my World Eater into an 8/8. And now it's time to start getting in the red zone.
Yeah, and you can see that Monstrosity, in my mind, is Chris saying, listen, I can win this game pretty easily against your stuff on the ground because I have so many blockers and so much power and Planeswalkers and all that stuff going on. What I need to cut off is the air and you being able to draw cards off of your flyers through your Biden.
Pulokranos doesn't care about Jace's +1. Gonna take care of the Planeswalker now. And now Dieckhaus' board is dwindling very quickly, but now Devotion is much lower. It's at 4. Master of Blades would still be very good right now, as with Thassa, but lowering that count and now putting Dieckhaus in a difficult position of, do I attack your Planeswalkers? What is my plan on this particular turn? Make sure he just draws a card here, which is an island. We'll see exactly what Dieckhaus is going to do on this turn. It looks like it's going to be the Tidebinder Mage he's been holding for a little while. We'll see what he targets. It will be Pulokranos. So now the Ooze and Pulokranos are down. Now Xenagos is still hanging out. But that's all that VanMeter has right now.
Yeah, and I feel, I guess Gregg has the option of either finishing off Xenagos or drawing 2 cards. Right now, I think I would prefer to draw 2 cards, but Gregg is going to go after the Xenagos instead.
So Mutavault and Tidebinder Mage are going to take care of that. See if Gregg has any other action this turn. He did just draw that island. So he's going to pass the turn back because he did already play a land for the turn. So just an island over there for the Mono Blue Devotion player. VanMeter draws a card. It is a forest. Not going to have an impact on this board state. He has to pass the turn back with just the ability to make some Scavenging Ooze activations. So Dieckhaus is going to untap those lands. He draws a Frostburn Weird for the turn. He plays his island.
And now this is a great window for Gregg to get in and start drawing some cards with that Biden.
He's going to play Frostburn Weird pre-combat. See if he wants to activate Mutavault and get in there with his creatures or not. You see VanMeter's going to take a look at the graveyard, see what he can remove with Scavenging Ooze. There are 3 creatures down there, those 2 Judge's Familiars and Cloudfin Raptor that the World Eater did take care of.
And you see a slight operations error pretty regularly happening with Gregg here, where he has access to card drawers like Jace and like Biden, and is playing stuff before combat in lieu of drawing the cards first. Generally speaking, when you have access to card drawers, what you want to be doing is using them first, find out what you have after you use them, and then use your mana appropriately.
Yes. All 3 creatures are going to come into the red zone here. So 2 cards are going to be drawn as 1 creature is blocked there by the Sylvan Carrion. You see Rapid Hybridization and an island are the draws. Gregg has already played a land for the turn. So he'll probably just be passing the turn back with those 2 cards, but that's still a pretty good spot to be in.
Rapid Hybridization is a good insurance policy here for Gregg and a variety of VanMeter's bigger draws.
Yeah.
So
Scavenging Ooze activation ×4 is going to take place here on the end step. Going to move the Ooze up into an 8/8, but more importantly, it's going to gain VanMeter some life as he's going to be untapping, taking a draw step, and looking for something that does anything. That's not something that does anything.
No.
That's a stomping ground.
Yet another land.
Yes. Now, to be fair, we already knew that Game 1 was a difficult matchup here for Red-Green Monsters. That much is obvious. And obviously, this game did not break the way that Chris wanted to. Pulokranos trying to get this game back on its own, was not able to. But, things will probably get better for Chris, presumably after sideboard.
Yeah, you need some more spot removal, some answers to flyers, which he has access to in his board. But game one there's a lot of little things going on in the blue devotion deck that make this matchup pretty rough.
Yeah. So Dieckhaus's draw for the turn was a Master of Waves. Very powerful Magic card.
Not shabby here.
One would say. And it looks like he may look into deploying this right now. And I'm actually okay with him deploying this pre-combat, mainly because Mutavolt's can become a 3/3 attacker.
This is an exception to the rule, because he is getting, like you mentioned, value off of his Mutavault.
So a bunch of elemental tokens are going to come. You see the devotion count. It's going to be 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 total after you add everything up. So we will get 9 elemental tokens out there. Dice currently representing those, but in just a moment we will have 9 water horses in play.
And I would imagine an attacking team of knuckleheads as well.
Yeah. That's the best thing to call those creatures that are in play. They're the knuckleheads that do make Master of Waves and Thassa the game-changing cards that they are. You see Mutavolt's going to be activated here. The knuckleheads, as you so eloquently put it, in Tidebinder Mage number 1 and 2 going to come in, along with Frostburn Weird, who is not a knucklehead. That's just a real Magic card.
The Idiot Brigade.
Yeah, also acceptable. Also acceptable. So, you've got Sylvan Caryatid in front of one of those Tidebinder Mages. Does not want to block anything else, of course, as it would lose the battle to Mutavault or Frostburn Weird. You see Frostburn Weird's going to get pumped up just a little bit here. You see 2 activations. Maybe a third is in order, and it is. So it'll be 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 damage total. Going to be dealt here to VanMeter, and then 3 triggers of Abidant.
Gregg wants to leave himself a blue mana left over here to be able to cast his Rapid Hybridization.
Yep, and VanMeter's going to draw his card. He knows he's long gone, and he's going to concede the game. So, Chris VanMeter down a game to Gregg Dieckhaus here. Red-green monsters versus mono-blue devotion. You've got VanMeter's deck list in front of you. This matchup is a very difficult one. What does he have access to?
His sideboard is 2 Rurik Thars, 2 Shocks, 2 Plummets, 4 Mistcutter Hydras, a Fleshblood, a Destructive Revelry, a Chandra Pyromaster, a Garruk Caller Beast, and a Mizium Mortars. I expect basically what Chris needs to do in this matchup is make his deck a little bit leaner and more streamlined. So I expect him to see him bring in some of his cheap removal, his additional copy of Mizium Mortars. I expect the 2 Shocks to come in, probably the 2 Plummets as well. He also has 4 copies of Mistcutter Hydra, which is a very good threat, of course, against a mono blue deck. So I would expect those cards to come in at the expense of some of his slower threats, maybe some of his Xenagoses or Stormbreath Dragons. Just some of the slower stuff needs to come out to make his deck a little bit leaner. And what do we got on the other side?
Well, let's take a look here. Again, you did see that Temple of Deceit, but not facilitating any black cards, no splash whatsoever. 1 Dissolve, 1 Annul, 2 copies of Mizium's Skin, a Dispel, an additional Jace Architect of Thought to go along with the 2 in the main deck, 2 Cyclonic Rift, 3 Essence Scatter, 3 Negate, and a Gainsay. So of the cards here that Dieckhaus does have access to, I love Essence Scatter, because the most important cards here from the VanMeter side, one would argue, is Planeswalkers.
Yes.
Or excuse me, are creatures, excuse me, not Planeswalkers. The most important, probably Polygrados, excuse me. I think that's just worth
I'm sure
countering.
Courser is excellent in this matchup as well,
Yeah,
too.
sure. I mean, smooth out those draws a little bit. I mean, had Chris had a Courser there, we might have a different game entirely. Jace, I don't love this matchup. Dispel, don't really care for. Mizium Skin, could be okay. But again, nothing real exciting. Dissolve is all right. Don't care for Annul. Negate? How do you feel about Negate?
Well, if he's going to bring in Negate, I'd rather just bring in Mizium Skin. I understand that you can negate Planeswalkers or what have you, but to me, what Gregg needs to do is make sure that he's on the front foot as much as possible, because when the game goes long and it's draw step against draw step, Chris has a pretty huge edge. He just has much more powerful cards in his deck. And so Gregg needs little cheap things that allow him to break serve and break tempo. Mizium Skin does allow him to do that. It's pretty efficient at countering Chris's removal spells. Negate's just a little too slow.
The other thing, too, and you're bringing this up, obviously, Mizium Skin is 1 mana cheaper than Negate, which certainly can matter. But the other one, too, is that Mizium Skin is a card that we have seen from mono blue decks before, but it's not really a card that people play around. Yeah. And I think that gives it a huge advantage of this kind of wonky effect that, again, Chris VanMeter, a very skilled player, so maybe he will prepare for it when he's playing. But I think, a lot of the times when we see Mizium Skin have a blowout effect, it comes basically out of nowhere, and the opponent's like, whoa, Mizium Skin, I did not see that coming, because it's not a card that is stock in these lists.
Yeah, the difference between in 1 or 2 mana is also, when your mono blue devotion opponent is holding up 2 mana, there's a lot of tricks that are on your radar as things that can be happening. When 1 mana is left, you can think to yourself, well, it's rapid hybridization, or maybe they just didn't have a mana to spend.
Yeah.
So Mizium Sin ends up getting played into a lot more often. Now, with Negate, if Gregg believes that Chris's best way to win the matchup is by getting to overloaded Mizium Mortars, or if he really values Chris's Planeswalkers, then Negate becomes a reasonable card to bring in. But in my mind, 2 mana is a lot to hold up. I don't think the Planeswalkers are that well suited for this matchup. And in the post-board games, he has to be much more equipped to break serve against cheaper cards like Shock, like Plummet, like additional non-overloaded Mizium Mortars and what have you. So I'm curious to see how Gregg sideboards. There's a rationale to bring in a variety of different cards here. Based on what I've seen in the matchup and where I think mono blue is favored, I like to keep the deck just as lean and streamlined as possible.
Yeah.
But it's easy to imagine scenarios where cards like Negate are quite good as well.
You don't want to change too much of the base of the deck. Again, you can sideboard out a card like Domestication. That's easy. Needle, you could argue maybe you want to leave 1 in because there are 2 in the main deck. Bident isn't at its best in this matchup, even though it was good in that particular game that we watched. Overall, I don't think it's the best card in this particular matchup. You can maybe slide some of that stuff out, but still be able to leave the core of the deck intact, which is creatures that provide devotion, and then everything that you're working towards building up Thassa and Master of Waves are still intact.
Yeah, Biden, I like your point about Biden. It's unlikely to be good in games that Gregg is losing, which is a critical, if Chris is executing his game plan, Biden is unlikely to be very good. So that one sticks out as one that's potentially should be sided out.
VanMeter's on the play here, so he has the option to keep or mulligan first, and he did not look too thrilled. Do you think he wants to keep with 10? No. I don't think he wants to keep with those 10 either. Did not look happy. It looks like Dieckhaus is going to keep his hand. And as Chris does shuffle up for game number 2, we'll be starting with, presumably 6 cards, but we'll see what happens. If you do want to join in on the conversation at home, we'd love to have you at SCG Live, hashtag SCGSTL. We're in round 1 of, yes, that does say 11 in the bottom right-hand corner, and that is not a misnomer. There are 11 rounds. There are too many people playing Magic here. Okay, that's not true. There's no such thing as too many.
There's a lot.
There are a lot. 763 Magicians here. And that's not even accounting for maybe some late registrants, but our official number today was 763. That means 11 rounds of Standard today. We'll have our entirety of the elimination rounds tomorrow morning. Normally we'll do the quarterfinals, give away 3 months of premium, call it a wrap, get about 5 hours of sleep, come back, do it all again tomorrow. We'll probably still get 5 hours of sleep, but we'll have 3 rounds to cover tomorrow morning as opposed to 2. But of course, if you guys do want to join in with us on Twitter, we'd love to have you. We'll be checking our tweets all weekend long as VanMeter starts off an Elvish Mystic. Dieckhaus has a Cloud from Raptor. Both players are off to nice starts here. We'll see what kind of mana VanMeter does have. Temple of Banning going to smooth things out. Looks like that's a copy of Destructive Revelry, my friend.
Left it in. I mean, he saw the Pithy Needle and Biden of Thassa and Domestication. So a ton of targets for that.
And he's just going to attack for 1 and pass the turn back as Dieckhaus does draw. He's got an Ichthos hanging out over there. You see Thassa, you see a Bident and Jace over there. Very expensive hand for Dieckhaus this go around. Does also have a Nightveil Spectre as well. But that Cloud from Raptor is looking a little lonely. He's just going to pass the turn back. So VanMeter quickly draws his card. Course of Crufix added to the grip. Already had one. Gonna play this one. I think he's looking for a land. I don't think he has one right now. And you do see the brand new 2/4. Going to show Mizium Mortars. Doesn't look like VanMeter has a 3rd land. And just going to pass the turn back. But this is a card here, Patrick, that has made a very nice impact on the format.
Yeah, it's quite powerful for these green mid-range decks that are in the market for kind of all parts of this. They want more mana. They need life to buy some time. The body's well-sized. And so no surprise, it's made a lot of impact early on.
Nightveil Spectre going to show up to the party, going to evolve that Cloud from Raptor, allow Dieckhaus to come in for 1, and going to put VanMeter down to 19. VanMeter going to go back up to 20 thanks to the Courser. Going to turn to the top card of his deck. It's a Shack.
A little shock.
A little Shack. Let's see where he's going to point that around here soon. But for right now, VanMeter has access to 4 mana. We know about the Mizium Mortars, as does Dieckhaus, so we'll see if he wants to fire that off to take care of the Nightveil Spectre. It is an important card in this matchup after all, and he is going to take it down. And now VanMeter does have the ability to get in for 3 points of damage, put Dieckhaus down to 16, but most importantly, the devotion count yet again is low.
Yeah, and this is the type of pacing of the game that's much better for Chris. It's helped out by the fact that Gregg's draw was a little slower this game, but he needs to keep his head above water. If he can keep pace early on in the game, then his more powerful 4 and 5 mana spells are going to be able to take the game over for him. Yeah. It's just surviving the early wave of stuff.
I think if you draw up a situation for VanMeter, I think that's how you want the game to go.
Yeah. And the big difference, of course, is Gregg was a little bit slower. Gregg's on the draw here, and Chris has a little more mana acceleration.
Looks like Dieckhaus is going to play a replacement Night Veil Spectre. Evolution complete here on the Raptor. Going to move up to a 2/3. So he's got 2/2/3 flyers in play right now. So that shock, not going to do a lot. It might be reserved for that Mutavault that's in play. But we'll see what does happen with the 1 mana instant. That's going to go to VanMeter's Grip. Sylvan Caryatid's going to be rolled off the top. You do see VanMeter's hand right now. 2 copies of Pulachronos. He's got the shock. I think he might have the Xenagos hiding out in his hand as well. Not entirely sure. No, hey, you do see a Xenagos. He's got another Courser as well. So a pretty good hand. The only thing that Chris needs right now is lands, but he does have things to play in the meantime.
Yeah. And that was a really sharp play by Gregg last turn. He had a lot of different options in his hand, but seeing the shock, knowing what the upside was of him getting both of his creatures to be 2/3s this turn, in lieu of playing something like Biden and drawing a card, I think a lot of players' instinct would have just been to do that, but that would have provided Chris with a lot of tempo, although he's going to make the block on the cursor anyway, so Chris still gets to have a pretty efficient turn.
Yeah, this is a good turn for Chris, as he's able to play 2 spells in 1 turn and get the Night Veil Spectre off of the table. Shock taking down the rest of the Spectre, gets another Courser in play. Now, of course, Courser not at its best in this matchup. It's certainly fine, but the life that it gains over the course of these games that we play, I think might end up being integral.
Yeah, the Red Green Monsters deck actually lacks a lot of good stuff to do before it hits 4 mana, so this bridges the gap a little bit. And the deck is very mana hungry, so depending on how the top of your deck is situated, this can be a lot of life and a lot of extra mana.
I know some people have tried Fnatic of Xenagos in that slot, opting not to go with that. Looks like we're going to have 3 mana here. There is a Thassa, God of the Sea. One would argue the best card in Mono Blue Devotion. Now showing up to the table. Dieckhaus didn't need it game 1.
Yeah, I think that is correct. I think it is the best card in the deck.
Followed up with a Judge's Familiar. I think one would argue not the best card in the deck.
A necessary evil. Yeah. That's what we call that one.
And across here for 2 comes the Cloudfin Raptor. Going to knock VanMeter down to 16, it looks like. Maybe 18. We'll make sure our life totals are good to go here as a Forest is revealed off the top. So back up to 18. Either way, he's going to move into Dieckhaus' turn at 18 life. Going to turn over a Temple of Abandon. Coursers are working overtime.
Yep, and now you're getting to see it. Those cards flex their muscles a little bit.
I know Michael Jacob, a very, very big fan of Courser. He was, of course, always a very big fan of the Oracle of Medaya, but he also loves the Courser. I think he likes this card too. Xenagos, God of Revels, has shown up to the party. And this is actually one of my least favorite cards because, my goodness, is it good.
There's a lot of raw power here, and when Born of the Gods got previewed, this was the card that a lot of people said most naturally slotted into a pre-existing standard deck, and you're seeing it on display here. The Red-Green Monsters deck, of course, it has a lot of large creatures, so doubling them up is awesome. There's a lot of permanence and a lot of colored mana symbols, so actually turning on Xenagos, fulfilling the devotion count is not very challenging. And, the deck already plays 5 mana spells, so it's not a huge cost to add additional big stuff.
I see, as you see, VanMeter is going to point to Thassa to say, hey, make sure you do scry on your upkeep here. Take a look at a Mutavault, and we'll see what Dieckhaus does want to do with it. But I say Xenagos is one of my least favorite cards, only because I was getting my brains beat in at the PTQ I played last weekend by that card. I think I love that card when it's on my side of the table because that card is just unforgiving.
This is the way that a lot of Magic players interpret powerful cards. I'm a big fan of them when I'm the one who has them.
Yeah.
I am less of a fan of it when my opponent has it.
I did not enjoy that card in combination with Gore Clan Rampager. I was dying a lot to that combo.
Oh, that is a combo.
Yes, it is.
It's a combination.
Yeah, it's a combination deck. You see a Jace Architect of Thought was going to be put into play here. You see the Devotion count. 2 for the Jace, so 1 for everything else that's in play. So Thassa is live and kicking. Now, one thing I know when I took a look at Xenagos is I basically looked at that as a card as, okay, what does the text do when it's not a creature? And the text when it's not a creature is obviously quite good because my assumption is that it would actually be difficult to make a creature. And I am, I guess, happy to say that I was wrong about that. That card is a creature more often than I thought it ever would be.
Yeah, no, again, there's a lot of incidental permanence, and this is another place where Courser is a great addition,
Yes.
being green-green.
Yes.
Arguably, the card would be worse for this deck if it was a green and 2 colorless instead of green 1 because it helps with the devotion count of Xenagos.
Yes. It is so much, I just thought that, there's so much of the time where, yeah, okay, that's going to make Pulachronos a 10-10. It's going to make a Stormvent Dragon 8-8, and then maybe Rampager gets involved and I'm dead. And that card is good enough if that's what it would do. But the fact that, yes, you can actually turn this on, and Courser, one of the new cards, actually helps to turn this card on, that makes it so much better than I initially gave it credit for. And that's when the card really, really looks good. And also, take a look at what it's doing right now, brick-walling a Thassa. Now, yeah, Thassa will brick-wall it back on attacks, but this card is brick-walling Thassa from attack right now. That's a big deal.
Yeah, and it's much more likely that Chris is able to keep his devotion count high than Gregg, because Chris is the deck with the removal.
Yes. So, Cloud from Raptor is going to come across for 2. VanMeter is going to go down to 16. He'll be going back up to 18 shortly, of course, because you do see the Temple of Bandit on top of his deck. But this is, again, how Chris would like these games to go. You've got Courser bridging the gap to help him find action. He's controlling what Dieckhaus is able to do. He was able to take care of those Nightveil Specters, which play a pretty important role in this matchup simply for their devotion. Also helps that they are flyers, which VanMeter's deck is weak against. He's going to put that force into play. He's going to move to 18 life from the 2 Courser triggers. We'll see what the top card is for him. But this is how it's kind of drawn up. Because Master of Waves isn't involved, you see Flesh Blood now revealed.
And there is no black mana in Chris's deck with the exception of Sylvan Caryatid, so that's basically just for the red-green half of the card.
The blood, as Pulokranos is going to join the party now, and this is what a red-green monsters deck looks like.
Yeah.
This is how this deck works, and it's firing on all cylinders right now. It's looking good. You've got Xenagos out there ready to get into the red zone, maybe pump with something else as well. Gonna pump Pulokranos, make that into a 10-10, and you know what he says? Everybody, let's go.
It's a party.
Yeah, let's get into the red zone. All right, Elvish Mystic, you know what? You go back to the land row, because you're weak. But everybody else, my monsters, you guys get in there.
Players, that is time in the round.
Make sure to trigger your Jace so they're only attacking for 17 or what,
Yeah.
what have you.
Yeah. Don't forget the Jace. Do not forget the Jace, please. All right, so we're gonna see some blocks take place here. We'll see what the life totals look like after the dust settles and all of that stuff. I don't think Judge's Failure is long for this world.
Yeah,
I think that's going to go under the bus here. You see Xenagos, it is a 6-5, so Chris kind of helping Dieckhaus along here, saying, are you sure this is what you want to block, all that good stuff. We'll see how much damage does go across here as Dieckhaus is at 10 right now. It's going to be less than that momentarily. But most important thing here for Chris, and this is the situation you want to get yourself in when you're playing Greener Monsters, is that you are ahead so that a Master of Waves can't turn the game around for Dieckhaus.
Yeah.
Because you have the answer already on the table. And so, as such, if Master of Waves was drawn here by Dieckhaus, Chris doesn't really care, as he does deploy, not that Temple, Sylvan Caryatid after combat. Now, the devotion here for Thassa is off because there's only 4 in play because Judge Miller bit the dust, It can't go back on because of the binding grip. But if you're VanMeter, you're loving how this game's going.
Yeah, this looks really good for him right now. I mean, the only card that I think Chris is probably worried about at all is perhaps a random Cyclonic Rift hanging out somewhere, but setting aside that kind of stuff, Chris is in a commanding position.
Yeah, I think that's the only card he cares about right now, right? It's the spells that he cares about right now, be it Rift or maybe Rapid Hybridization. I don't even convinced he cares that much about that.
It feels like he's got way too much stuff going on right now for something like Rapid Hybridization to appreciably able to catch him up here.
Yeah. So this is going to be activated here, this Nykthos for 4 mana, to allow Dieckhaus to cheat a little bit on the mana to put a Biden into play. Saves 1 to be able to do that. So now Biden does join the party, which turns on Thassa itself for devotion. So now you've got a 5-5 and a 2-3 flyer out there. Now the question here is, does Dieckhaus want to attack to try to draw a card, or does he just want to hang back on defense? You see VanMeter's going to take a look at the graveyard here very quickly. He's going to see 2 Nightveil Specters and a Judge's Familiar in the bin.
And this is a place where I feel like he might have needed to start with minusing Jace to see how that informs his decision-making going forward.
And that's what he's going to do right now, so he will minus Jace. Here are the top 3 cards. You see 2 Cloud from Raptors and an Island, so I probably wouldn't have changed very much, but I agree with you. As far as sequencing goes, you want to work with as much information as possible before you start tapping the old mana.
So looking at here, just not a really impactful Jace here by Gregg.
You see, he's going to take the 2 creatures, the 2 Cloud from Raptors. Chris probably giving those to him, thinking, I can just shoot those down with Pulokranos, so I don't really care very much about that at all.
And it appears no copies of Cyclonic Rift anywhere in his... there's 2 in the sideboard, sorry. So it is something that is live for this game, potentially.
So now here is a Cloud from Raptor. There is the other Cloud from Raptor. So all the information is present here for VanMeter for him to make an appropriate decision. And I think in a moment, we'll be moving on to a 3rd and final game here. I predict, and I could be wrong, we'll probably see Xenagos pump up Pulokranos for Flesh Blood to go 10 upstairs.
Yeah.
You see the Raptor's going to come across here.
And Chris is, you can see, a little bit of, looks like a little bit of antsiness. He just wants to get the game over with. You can see the clock ticking down up there, under 7 minutes. And so his takes a little bit on the slower side too. So he just wants to make sure that there's enough time for him to potentially win a third game.
Yeah, we're in an 11-round tournament. Starting off with a draw is about as good as a loss.
Yeah.
In this tournament. You see Chris is going to say, okay, Xenagos, trigger, make my Polakranos into a 10-10, blood you, deal you 10. It goes upstairs. And we're going to move into a third game momentarily here. Yeah. Okay. So that's going to do it. So VanMeter's able to tie it up 1-1 as we move into a third game. You've got the clock there in the middle. We're going to probably start this game somewhere around 5 minutes. So you see Chris doesn't even go back to the sideboard. And this is a very experienced player here. So he's happy with his configuration. He understands that time is of the essence. Probably asking the table judge there, okay, how much time do we have for game 3? 6:08 is the answer, but it's ticking down, and so it's probably going to be game 5. And I think what he's probably saying is, hey, let's get moving.
Yeah. And you see Flesh Blood momentarily brought up there on the screen. Slightly irritating to have the split cards come up as they are presented. You have to tilt your head or what have you. But it basically allows you to, the red-green side allows you to shoot something equal to the power of a creature you control, and the flesh side allows you to essentially scavenge a creature in your graveyard or something.
Yeah. You see VanMeter, again, not going back to his sideboard at all. Dieckhaus is going back to his sideboard. A little bit of frustration here for Chris, and it's understandable, especially if you play a lot of tournament Magic, where he knows right now, I know exactly what's running through his head because I've been in that spot, and you probably have been too. There are 5 minutes.
Yeah. Come on.
I do not want to draw. A draw is the worst possible situation for me right now. Let's get this show on the road. Again, a draw arguably is pretty bad a high percentage of the time, outside of when you're drawing into the top 8. But, especially in an 11-round tournament, round 1, you do not, that is a loss if you start with a draw, for all intents and purposes. Especially in this tournament that we're in here in St. Louis, you got 11 rounds. You have to likely go 10-1 to make top 8 this weekend.
Yeah, and adding a little bit to Chris's potential frustration is, it's very clear there's nothing malicious going on Gregg's side, but he's been playing a little on the slow side. Some of the operations have been not the sharpest.
Yeah.
And so that's eating into the time a little bit as well.
Yeah, and you basically said it. Chris having to remind him how this works, that works, untap some things, sequencing, all of that stuff. It's kind of all adding up into the time crunch here. And when you're a competitive player like Chris is, and also think about the situation here for Chris too. This particular weekend for Chris VanMeter is very important. He's trying to take advantage of the fact that William Jensen, Owen Turtenwald, Brian Brondwin, Brad Nelson, and everybody else who's trying to get a Season 1 qualification for the Players' Championship, they're not here.
Yeah.
And so he made the 12-hour trek over to St. Louis thinking, okay, this is huge for me. These guys aren't here. I can get some open series points. If I spike one of these tournaments, I get to number 1, shave. Number 2, I might be on the top of the leaderboard when all is said and done at the end of this weekend. So him starting off with a draw, yuck.
Horrible.
Yeah, horrible. And again, I'm with you. Nothing malicious here going on by Gregg. Just the sequencing is a little slow. He might not be someone who plays in a lot of tournaments, but when you're a competitive player who's, looking to accomplish something very specific on a weekend, you can understand maybe the frustration a little bit.
Yeah. And magnifying things is, it's very realistic for Gregg to win a 5-turn game.
Yes, it is.
Much harder for Chris to do the same thing.
We just saw the last game that Chris played where, it takes him about 7 or 8 turns to win the game.
Yeah.
He was comfortably in control of that entire game, but it takes a little bit of time to get the job done. As you see, both players are going to keep their opening 7. Dieckhaus is going to start for the Cloud Raptor and pass the turn back. So a good start for him is VanMeter is going to draw a Mutavault. You do see an Elvish Mystic hanging out in his hand. So we'll see if he wants to play that or start with a Temple of Abandon. He may have thought that was a stomping ground. And that is a stomping ground. Okay, so he does have one of those and the Temple in his hand. VanMeter's going to go down to 18. He's going to shock the Cloud Raptor and pass the turn back as we are under 3 minutes in the match.
Yeah.
So Dieckhaus is going to take a draw. He'll untap. He's going to play a Temple of Deceit. Take a look at the top card. It's a Jace Architect of Thought. Going to put that back on top. You see his hand. He does have a Tidebinder Mage, a Master of Waves, a couple of lands, and a Jace will be added to his hand on his next turn. There is your Judge's Familiar. Dieckhaus will pass the turn back. VanMeter draws a Stomping Ground. He's going to play a Temple of Abandon. Let's take a look. It's a Flesh Blood. He does not want that for his next turn or future turn, so he's going to put that onto the bottom. Looks like we're going to see him add an Elvish Mystic to the board, so he's off to a nice start this game as he passes the turn back to Dieckhaus, who will add that Jace to his hand. And he does have 2 lands in his hand there, and another copy of Temple of Deceit and an island. For those of you wondering at home, 4 Temple of Deceits in his deck. Not facilitating any black splash, though. Just wants to scry. Gonna keep an island on top. So that will be added to his hand. Then he decides, I'd rather put that on the bottom.
Gregg has an excellent draw this game, too. I mean, he has
Yes.
Tidebinder for this turn, and then a lot of really powerful 4s, it looks like. He has Master and Jace, and apparently a 4th land as well, as he scryed a land to the bottom.
Yeah. You see his hand, Master, Jace, Island, and Tidebinder Mage. Tidebinder is going to take care of the Elvish Mystic. 1 from the Familiar, going to knock VanMeter down to 17. VanMeter going to quickly untap. He's going to take a draw. It's another copy of Elvish Mystic. And now things are starting to get really, really rough here for Chris. Because now I think his game plan is probably something along the lines of, okay, I have to get towards Mizzium Mortars now, because I don't really have much going on in my hand.
Yeah, and he has another mana accelerant this turn, so it's not that unrealistic for him to get there, but...
There's a Mutavault. He's going to Mortars a Tidebinder Mage to get his Elvish Mystic back. So that's going to take care of that. Follow-up play is an Elvish Mystic. And of course, you see him do that because the 2/2 body isn't all that threatening, but it's the fact that it provides devotion.
Yeah.
Maybe Chris believes that he has a Thassa or Master Waves in his hand. You guys know at home that there is a Master of Waves looming. So let's see what Dieckhaus is going to do on this turn.
Yeah, it's not...
Okay, so now he's going to untap his permanent, and to take a draw step. So now there's Judge's Familiar. Of course, he did put the island to the bottom, so that's a mystery card that was drawn off the top, and it is another 1/1 flyer.
And this feels like a very good window for Gregg to land a Jason plus it.
Yeah. I'm with you on that one. We'll see what he does want to play. And he is going to deploy the Architect of Thought. So Planeswalker has shown up to the party. 4 counters there. We'll see how he does want to use the Planeswalker. You like the idea of plussing it here?
I like plussing quite a bit against that board.
Looks like he agrees with you.
Because once it survives this turn, assume that Jace doesn't die, then the Master next turn is an enormous threat.
Yeah. So Jace does move up. Familiar's going to come across for 1. VanMeter's going to take 1. He's going to untap. You see the clock is at quadruple 0. So we are in turns here. And as you mentioned, if there's one player who can win in turns right now, because there's a Master Waves in Dieckhaus' hand, it is Gregg.
Yeah.
Now Mutavault's going to come across here. That's going to go down to 3. Tricky. Missed the trigger. It just does pass the turn back. So this is going to be turn number 1. So Dieckhaus will have 1, 3, and 5. VanMeter's going to have 2 and 4. And for VanMeter now, as you mentioned, it's unlikely that he'll be able to win a game in the subsequent turns, if we're on a short game.
Right.
And this is a game where VanMeter now has to fight for a draw.
Yeah. To win from here, VanMeter needed something like he needed an earlier Mistcutter Hydra in this whole sequence.
Yeah.
I think at this point, he can really only play defense.
So you see Dieckhaus' hand, he's got the Master, he's got the Judge's Familiar, and he's got a Frostburn Word that was just added to it. So we'll see if he wants to use Jace, and if he does, how does he want to use it? Does he want to minus it now? Does he just want to plus it? But, for Dieckhaus, he's got to get, he has the opportunity potentially to win this game because this is turn 1. So that means on turn 3, he'll have creatures to attack with. On turn 5, he'll get 1 more final attack. So you might just be forced to cast Master Waves this turn.
I think that Gregg's best path to actually try to win this game in time is to plus Jace, play Master, next turn, minus Jace, looking for a second Master, and
Pump up his guys to attack?
Yeah, right.
Sure.
That to me, I think he needs back-to-back Masters to be able to cobble together lethal in time.
Sure. He's going to take a different route. He's going to go with Frostburn Word and Judge's Familiar. Attack here for 1. Looks like VanMeter's going to go down to 16 on the attack. As the birdie's going to come across the air. We might see a shock here. It's possible. It's not the most compelling use of shock.
I mean,
but,
when
you're fighting for a draw, it's not the worst place in the world to be. So VanMeter's going to be turn number 2. Chris is going to take a draw here. He'll find a Courser.
I think that, Chris might just be feeling like that Judge's Familiar doesn't move the knob either way on what I can cast this turn or me dying in time. So you might get a better spot to do something better with that shock. Maybe you want it for a Tidebinder Mage at some point down the line or what have you.
VanMeter looked like he wants to cast Courser Crewfix. He's deciding how he wants to do so. He's going to use the Elvish Mystic to get the new 2/4 into play. See the top card of the deck. There's a Gore-Clan Rampager. Not going to have much of an effect on this game. As again, we are on turn number 2 here. VanMeter going to play a Force. He's going to gain a life, go up to 16. And he does still just have that shock and a land in his hand, a Rampager off the top of his deck. So those are basically the cards he's going to get to play with the rest of the game because he gets one more turn.
Which, barring something crazy happening, should be enough for VanMeter to defend himself and at least get a draw.
Yeah. Turn number 3 of 5. As Dieckhaus does untap, he'll take a draw. See what it was. Didn't make it out quite well. Again, we know exactly the one card in his hand was a Master of Waves. The new card in his hand is currently a mystery. But of the cards that are important, I think Master of Waves is the only card that actually does matter, given where we are in the game. So it was an island. Now the devotion count here on Master, 2, 4, 5, 6. It would be for 7. That'd be 7 2-1s. It's a lot of 2-1s.
It's a lot.
Gonna go down. 1, 2, and 3. So it looks like Master is that Nykthos could be important. There's a negate. That Nykthos could facilitate something like a Cyclonic Rift.
Sure.
Could be a really big deal. See, VanMeter's gonna split up a negate on its own. Nykthos and Frostburn Weird over there. That's actually kind of dangerous, honestly. Because, again, VanMeter doesn't know what's in Dieckhaus' hand, but that Nykthos can facilitate a Cyclonic Rift overload. He can actually take the Nykthos, activate it to be able to play Frostburn Weird, and then Master of Waves. So that thing's actually going to generate a huge advantage in this game. Not, I haven't done the math on if that Master Waves is going to be a lethal attacker or not, but this could be a big deal.
Well, I think that Dieckhaus might have played his land before.
You're right.
His
He
fifth
did.
land here
Played
before
the
combat,
island, yeah.
so.
Okay, it goes back to the sequencing that we talked about during game 1.
It's possible VanMeter has to value that Nykthos entirely differently if that is an available land drop for the turn.
Make a very, very good point. As I think presumably 4 lands are going to be cast here, we're going to see Master of Waves hit the table. Again, the devotion here is 2, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7 Water Horses are going to come into play.
Well, I think this might compel Chris to respond with the shock now that he knows that there's a negate in Gregg's hand. The shock won't do anything if Gregg gets to untap, so he might want to just cash it in now.
It looks like it's what he's going to do, Patrick.
Maybe he wants to take care of Judge's Familiar, maybe he wants to go after Jace.
Yeah. I think he might be inclined to go after Jace here, since it lowers the devotion count, but Judge's Familiars can attack and deal 2 points of damage. So, what do you value more? Devotion over the next turn of the game?
Right.
Because that would make 2 more creatures, or taking down a familiar, which will save you a point of damage and 1 less devotion. That's the big question. But on the flip side, the Jace could actually reveal something that matters, as your Master of Waves plan that you talked about, hitting runner, Master of Waves to make the elementals into 3/2s could end up being even more important.
Yeah, now that you know, or rather, it's just now negate left over in Gregg's hand, so it's like, I know Overloaded Cyclonic Rift is not something on the table anymore.
Yeah, that's true. You can control that, obviously. All right, so in for 1, VanMeter goes down to 15. He'll reveal a top card of his deck. It's a Temple of Abandon. He does have a Forest and Gorkland Rampager in his hand. He's going to play the Temple. He's going to trigger the Courser. Going to go up to 16. We'll see a Scry momentarily. Top card is a Mountain. That's going to the bottom. Now, of course, this is turn 4. This is VanMeter's last turn to actually make actions on his main phase, so he's not going to get another turn. So the last card we're going to see here is a Mountain, and along with VanMeter having just a Rampager and a Forest in hand, that's all he gets to work with.
Yeah, and that's a funny little interaction that you saw. If Courser's in play, then your Scries are actually public, because the top card of your deck stays revealed the whole time. So VanMeter was not showing off there. The Courser actually forces him to reveal what his Scry was.
So I think if you're VanMeter here, you probably just deploy the Rampager and just pass back and hope for the best.
I don't know what else he's allowed to do.
Yeah. The big question here, and this might actually come back to hurt him here because he had a Forest in his hand, is he could have played the Forest instead of the Temple, so he'd have another blocker. Because right now he's only got 4 blockers where he could have access to 5. And if that comes back to hurt him here, if another Master Waves come rolling off the top, you see a Mutavault to go along with Dieckhaus's negate. This could really come back to hurt him.
I was about to mention the exact same thing.
Yeah. And so now, are we going to cash this in?
Winkle and
We are.
Graves, please report to the stage.
So top 3 coming. 1, 2, 3. All right, dodges the bullet. No Master of Waves. You see 2 Nightveil Specters and a Pithing Needle. See the split here from VanMeter.
And this almost certainly cements a draw, assuming that we had the untimed turn starting when we believe they did.
And this is turn number 5 of 5 here. And I believe momentarily, after Gregg does analyze the game state, sees that he can't get in for just enough damage, we'll be shaking hands, and both players will start this tournament 0-0-1, which is
what a slog.
Yeah, which is tough place to be in.
Not only is it tough for the purposes of making top 8, but it also means you're likely to be playing against other slow deck/players for the remaining 10 rounds.
Now, this is kind of interesting too, though, because when you think of the draw bracket in our particular standard format, and this is by no means a lock or anything of that nature, but when you think of the draw format, decks that could be in the draw bracket, excuse me, you think of Revelation decks.
Yeah.
And those are the decks that Monsters actually wants to be paired against, as they have Domri, they've got Xenagos, they've got access to Chandra, Courser. You know, they feel like their Revelation matchups are very good. So, you know, while this is a negative for both of these players, and certainly VanMeter for what he's trying to accomplish on this particular weekend, it may not be all bad. It may not be all bad. And presumably, I think if we continue playing out this game, and this is, again, nothing that's set in stone, but VanMeter's behind the 8 ball in this game, so he may have just lost this game.
Oh, I think this game was going quite badly for Chris.
Yeah. You do see blocks take place here. And so you see some damage that will come across here. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 damage. Going to knock VanMeter down to 7, but 7 is not 0. And there will be an extension of the hand. And we're going to have a draw in round 1 of 11 here between Gregg Dieckhaus and Chris VanMeter. Mono Blue Devotion, Red Green Monsters, they don't win, they don't lose. They shake hands and have a nice day.
And possibly good for both decks, you know. The Blue Devotion deck, I know how good is this matchup against Esper Blue White Control is the subject of some controversy amongst good players. But certainly the post-board games for Mono Blue are pretty favorable for the most part.